Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you are all doing well. Hello to those in Zoom. We are also on Facebook Live on Education USA Costa Rica. If you want to follow us on Facebook Live, or if you want the recording of this webinar to watch later. Today, we will be talking about taking a gap year. So the title of today's session is Have No Fear in Taking a Gap Year. And we're going to go ahead and get started because we have lots to talk about today. And on our agenda, first I'll explain really briefly what Education USA is. I'll go over some frequently asked questions and our services. I will also explain what a gap year is and what you have to consider when you take a gap year. And then we're going to hear from 4 students we have with us who have taken a gap year or are taking a gap year at the moment. And then we'll open up for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions during today's session, please send them to Q&A Maria Jose Carazo if you are in Zoom. So send them to Q&A Maria Jose Carazo. And if you are on Facebook Live, you can just put them in the comments there. So first, let's discuss Education USA. Education USA is an educational advising program that is located around the world and offers support to students who are interested in pursuing higher education studies in the United States. So someone who wants to study a bachelor's, master's, PhD, intensive English program, we will help you in that process. And our basic educational advising services are free, right? We're the official source on U.S. higher education for the U.S. government because we are funded by the U.S. government and we are a network, right? We have Education USA Nicaragua, Education USA Panama, Education USA Mexico. We have a lot of different centers. So I know that a lot of you are joining us from different countries today. And if you have any questions after this, we encourage that you reach out to the Education USA Center closest to you in your country, and we'll be happy to help you as you apply to U.S. universities and colleges. Some common questions we get in Education USA, the first one and the most popular is if we are a scholarship program. Education USA is not a scholarship program, but rather an educational advising program, as I mentioned. So we can guide you through the process and we can explain the different types of financial aid that exist and hopefully how you can get those different types of financial aid, but we cannot finance your studies, okay? Another common question we get is if there are opportunities to improve your English. If you're interested in studying a bachelor's or a master's or PhD, you should already have an advanced level of English. And if you want to go and study English in an intensive manner, a lot of universities and colleges do offer intensive English programs where you can go and have the same university experience, but improve your English, okay? Another question we get is if we can help you find short-term study abroad or internships. And the answer there would be that we focus more on the services offered by U.S. universities and colleges. So those academic programs that I mentioned to get a degree or to study an intensive English program. And another question is if we work with specific universities. We do not work with specific universities, but rather we represent all of the 4,700 accredited U.S. universities and colleges. So you guys as the students are actually going to tell us where you want to apply based on your personal and academic preferences. And we will explain the different things that you need to do and how to do all of the different required documents and help you along the way. As I mentioned, when we help you along the way, we like to divide this in 5 steps because it can be kind of an overwhelming process because it can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to complete. So in the beginning, we can explain how to look for your different options. What are some good search engines you can use to bring that large 4,700 universities to a smaller list for you. For step 2, we'll talk about the different types of financial aid that exist at the different types of institutions and what would be some realistic options for you and your family's budget. And step 3, for me, is the longest step because it includes studying for standardized tests, writing a lot of essays, requesting letters of recommendation, writing about your activities on the Common App. It's a long process, but we'll help you with all of the different questions you may have. And then after you have applied and gotten into an institution, you will apply for your student visa, which is the F1 visa. And we'll explain how to do that. What are the steps you need to follow, where you need to pay, so that you can arrive to the interview at the US Embassy in your country, the US consulate, prepared and ready to go for that interview. And step 5 is a pre-departure orientation, which is a series of webinars we offer every year in June or July, right before the students leave to start their studies in August. And in the pre-departure orientation, we're always going to talk about, how the healthcare system works in the United States, what the academic culture is going to be like, where you're going, what are some things that you should bring from your home country and what you could buy there, all of the things you need to prepare for this new chapter in your life. And now I would like to know where everyone is from today. So here we go. On your screen, if you're in Zoom, you should see a question asking where you're joining us from today, whether it's Canada, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, or another country around the world. And if you're on Facebook Live, we invite you to put it in the comments because we'd love to see where everyone is joining us from, as we can kind of get a better idea of the geography and geographical diversity that we have. So almost everyone who's in Zoom has voted. So the majority of our Zoomers, I invented a new word, are from Central America, but we do have some people from the Caribbean, Mexico, and other countries, which is great to hear. Hello to those from other parts of the world. So now I'm going to talk about what is a gap year, which is what we've been talking about today. So a gap year refers to when a student decides to graduate from high school and not immediately begin their university or college studies. And they choose to take a free year, or you may have heard it called a sabbatical year, but most commonly we call it a gap year. And it's called a gap year because that year creates a gap or a hole in the student's educational path, right? Because for a lot of students, they will study the 4 years in high school and immediately begin 4 years in college, but that's not required, right? You can take a gap year, it's acceptable, it's a great option. And so this refers to a period of time between your high school studies and your university studies. What can I do during a gap year? And along the same lines, what can't I do during a gap year if I decide to take a gap year and not start my studies? So there are endless options of what you can do during a gap year. I'm a big supporter of gap years. I think that if at the end of high school you're not sure about what you want to study and you want to take a year to reflect on that, to work on your profile, to get a stronger profile, that's a great option. There's no rush to start your studies. So during a gap year, if you have the hope that after the gap year you can apply to U.S. universities as a freshman or a first-time student, during your gap year, you could do internships. These could be paid internships or unpaid internships, right? Where you're acquiring work skills in the field. You could get a job, like a part-time job at a restaurant, work, save up some money because you might need to pay for the application related fees, right? You could do volunteer work or community service. I definitely recommend considering doing this because as you all may know, in the United States, the culture promotes helping others in community service and really has a lot of importance on helping others. So if you didn't have a lot of time to do volunteering or community service in high school, you could take advantage of a gap year to strengthen that part of your profile, right? You could learn another language in a language institute. Why language institute? Because if you want to apply as a freshman, you can't earn any college credit, right? So it would have to be in a language institute and not like starting a degree at a university. You could participate in an international exchange program. For example, my cousin, when she graduated from high school, she decided to go to France for a year and she worked as a babysitter, as an au pair. And then she came back and started college, right? You can also take educational courses like in Spanish, we call them cursos libres, on platforms like edX or Coursera or different educational institutions as long as you're not earning university credit. And you can obviously take the year to work on your college applications, study for the TOEFL, study for the SAT, work on those essays, right? Participate in Education USA webinars. However, if you are okay, if you don't want to apply as a freshman and you actually want to apply as a transfer student, another thing you could do during your gap year would be taking classes at a local university or college in your college. Because remember, if you want to apply to a U.S. university or college as a freshman, a first-time student, you cannot have any university credit from any institution in the world. So if you decide to graduate high school and start at a local college in your country, and you say, oh, I'll just take a few classes and I'll work on my college applications, the college application process will change because you can no longer apply as a freshman. You now have to apply as a transfer student, okay? And it is different, and there are different financial possibilities, okay? So I got ahead of myself. Why can't I start university classes in my home country and apply as a freshman? Universities and colleges in the United States have this definition that a freshman or a first-year student is someone that does not have any college credit from any other university or college in the world. A lot of times students say, well, I don't even, like, I want to start a new carrera. I want to start a new degree. So can I apply as a freshman? Unfortunately, no. If you have earned any credit from another university or college in the world, you need to apply as a transfer in the majority of cases, right? And unfortunately, there are very few scholarships or financial aid opportunities available for transfer students. So it's something that you need to take into consideration when you're making a decision whether or not you want to take a true gap year and not take any university classes, or if you want to start classes in your home country and apply as a transfer, okay? Oftentimes, I've seen students that say like, well, what's the big deal? Like, how will the university know that I started classes? The thing that you have to keep in mind is that in the United States, we follow the honor code. And so when you apply to an institution, an academic institution, and you apply as a freshman, you are essentially swearing that the truth is that you have never earned college credit. And if they were to find out that you lied, there are severe consequences. So I wanted to show you guys an example here. This is from Texas A&M, which is a university in Texas, right? And here they're explaining that you would qualify to apply as an international freshman if you are a student that doesn't have any college credit. The only exception is if you have earned college credit that is a dual credit, which means you took it while you're in high school and it counted for a high school credit and college credit, right? That's the only exception. And on the same website, they explain that if you were to apply and lie or not mention something on your application, for example, not mention that you started classes in your home country, it's considered an act of dishonesty, and the consequences can be super severe. So if the institution were to find out that you actually had started classes and you didn't tell them about it, they could reject you from the beginning. Or if you already have gotten in, when they find out, they can cancel your acceptance, cancel your enrollment, and you will no longer be a student there. So that's why it is really important to understand the seriousness of the situation, okay? Another question we commonly get is what the universities are going to think about a gap year, because people always wonder, like, is it going to look bad that I'm taking a gap year? As I mentioned, I don't think it's bad to take a gap year as long as you're using it for personal growth and improvement, okay? However, you do need to keep in mind that when you decide to apply to the U.S. universities and colleges the following year, they're going to ask you about your gap year. There's a question on the comment app that says, like, I did or will take a gap year, and you would have to click yes. And as soon as you click yes, they're going to ask you to provide details about why you took this gap year, right? If you can truly explain what you did in your gap year, you can explain that you wanted to confirm what you want to study before starting, or that you didn't want to start classes during the COVID-19 pandemic because you're immunocompromised. If you have a real reason that you can justify, that's great. The universities will accept it. But universities and colleges don't really want you to say, I took a gap year to work on my college applications. Why? Because there are thousands of other high school students that do manage to apply to the U.S. universities and colleges while they're in their senior year of high school, right? And so saying, oh, I didn't have enough time is not a valid excuse when many other students made the time for the process, right? So you have to be careful about how you frame this year you took. If it was for personal growth and improvement, that's great. Another topic or vocab word I wanted to mention is a deferral, because one of our students on our student panel is actually deferred. She's in a gap year because of a deferral. So I wanted to explain it. Deferral is when the students apply to the U.S. universities or colleges during their final year or during their senior year, but for some reason, something happens or they decide that they don't want to start their studies the next year that follows, the immediate school year. They actually want to take like a gap between it. And so when you defer, you're essentially asking the university if they can hold your spot for 1 year so that you don't have to begin to apply from zero, okay? So as you can see, I'm a very visual person at the bottom. A gap year would be you're applying to college in your last year of high school, then you take a gap year because you're deferring for whatever reason, and then you begin your studies the next school year that follows. But you don't have to repeat the application process from zero, okay? Why would someone defer? What are some possible reasons that someone needs to defer? Health problems, for example, a lot of students that are immunocompromised and have different health factors had applied to institutions in December of 2019. And then when the pandemic happened in March of 2020, they didn't necessarily feel comfortable going to the United States when they weren't vaccinated. So they asked to defer and take a year, okay? Other situations like someone in your family, maybe they're sick and the student thinks that they really need to be home for that year to support their family, or even economic difficulties. Let's say that someone in your family loses their job and going to college right in that moment might be more of an obstacle and you kind of want to wait a year until this person gets a job again. These are just some examples, okay? And another question we get is if a deferral is automatically accepted. No, you actually do have to apply. So the way it works is you apply to the institution, they accept you, and you decide, yes, I want to go to this institution. So you decide around April or May, and then let's say that in June, you decide, no, I need to defer because something happened. You have to request the deferral and send in an application. And most institutions will ask for a justification, right? Because they need to justify why they should hold your spot for an entire year. Okay. And there are different options that could happen. The university can say, yes, you can defer and nothing changes. We'll see you in a year. Other institutions might say, yes, we'll defer your acceptance, but we need you to send in your economic information next year. And other ones might say, no, you cannot defer, which would mean that you either need to go to the university in that moment or start to apply again the next year from zero, right? Different options we have. And now it's my great honor to introduce the students we have with us today, because I know for all of you, it's more interesting to hear from students who've done it, who are doing it, right? And we have some great students here with us to tell us their stories. So first we have Deli Alpizar, who is a young student of ours from Costa Rica. Deli, if you can put your camera on, there she is. It's a little cold here in Costa Rica, hence why we're in sweaters. We also have Carlos Enriquez, who is from El Salvador. Carlos is a senior at Macon College, but he's actually in an exchange semester in South Korea. So it's 7 a.m. for Carlos. Thanks for waking up and joining us. We have Tami Leon, who's from Mexico. She's also taking a gap year like Daly. Carlos took his gap year back when he applied. And then we have Mafer, who's from Costa Rica. And Mafer is the student that I mentioned who already applied and chose her school. She'll be attending Purdue University, but she actually decided to defer for a year and not go this year, but start next year in August. So we're going to get started and we're going to kind of take turns asking the students questions. And remember, if you guys have questions for the students or you have questions for me, please send your questions to Q&A, Maria Jose Carazo. Okay, so the first question that we have is, how did you come to the decision of taking a gap year? And did you feel supported in your decision? So I want to start with Mafer. Actually, I would like Mafer to kind of comment on why you chose to defer for a year and if you felt supported in this decision.
Well, my decision basically started when my parents told me the idea. They mentioned the idea since I graduated with 17 years old. I wasn't even 18, so they told me that I could consider the idea for me to have more time, to be more mature and be much more ready to go to college. So the idea basically started from my parents, so I was definitely supported by them. And then I started researching and I decided that it would be a great idea since I wasn't sure which university, if I wanted to go or stay here, if I wanted to study, like what type of career I wanted to study. So I thought that it would be a better option for me and avoid like having a rush over the decisions. And that was basically the reason why I decided to take a gap year.
Very good. Tammy, can you tell us a little bit about taking a gap year and if you felt supported, not supported?
Yes, thank you, Mo. So my case is different from Maffer. For me, when I was in my junior year of high school, I already knew what I wanted to study. So in my case, a gap year wasn't for getting to know my interests better and being sure about what I want to major in college. I already had one thing in mind, and I've kept it for almost 3 years now. However, with the COVID pandemic, everything changed. All of my extracurricular activities, I was not able to do them in person anymore. And also, the economic situation in my family changed because prior to the COVID pandemic, I already had plans of studying in a university here in Mexico. However, with these changes and with COVID, I started to realize that it would not be possible for me to study. So that's when I started to think about the idea of taking a gap year. However, what the determining factor for me was that unfortunately one of my close relatives, my uncle, passed away, and with his death, I got reminded that I actually wanted to study outside of Mexico. I did not want to, I mean, I had set that goal of studying here in Mexico, but I did have the desire of studying outside of the country. And with him gone, I realized that actually it didn't really matter if I took 1 year more, if that would get me closer to my goal. So I had that idea in mind, and then I had to tell my parents. So I was not exactly supported at first. I don't know how it is in other countries, but at least here in Mexico or here in Oaxaca, where I'm from, taking a gap year is not always seen as something good, as something to get to know your interests better. It's often regarded as losing one's time and something that you shouldn't do, that you should finish your college degree in time or whatever that means. So I first told my mom, and she kind of accepted the idea when the weeks went by and she saw that I didn't change my mind. And after a couple of months, I told my dad, and my dad was shocked. He could not believe that I was going to take a gap year, or that I had the idea of taking a gap year, because in my case, I became an opportunity funds grantee, and that means that I do have very good academic achievement, and I also have some great extracurricular activities. So everyone kind of expected me to follow a certain path, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to follow my dream of studying outside of the country. So I told him that I wanted to take this gap year, and actually I had applied to the Opportunity Fund Scholarship when I was on my junior year. That's usually when people apply to the scholarship. However, I did not win the scholarship. And I thought to myself that if I had my senior year for getting better grades, for getting more extracurricular activities, that I would be able, I set that goal in mind of being able to win that scholarship. And I told my parents back in May 2020, next year I'm going to win this scholarship, and I'm going to pursue my desire of studying in another country. So it took me almost 5 to 6 months to completely convince my parents or to let me take this gap year, but fortunately they accepted it, and now I'm here.
It's a great story of perseverance and acknowledging that we don't all have to follow the same schedule or path in life. So thank you, Tammy. What about you, Carlos? How did you come to your decision, and did you experience some of the same things that Tammy did, or did you feel supported?
Absolutely, I felt super supported in my experience. I was very fortunate to attend an international school in Germany, and in Germany, or just in Europe in general, gap years have long been popular. So I think between 20 and 30% of my classmates ended up taking a gap year of some sort. Um, so I remember in my senior year going to my counselor's office to navigate the whole college application process and sort of look at my options. And but I felt like because I did the international baccalaureate program, which was super demanding. I remember feeling drained because I had already gone through the process of adapting to an academic system, like studying in English and, as a non-native speaker. So I felt like I needed a break to, work on myself, to, sort of fill in the gaps that were not filled by my traditional education per se. Um, and my high school had a partnership with, with a number of universities in the United States, but also as an alternative with some gap year programs. Um, so, I that's how I ended up applying for Global Citizen Year. And well, I guess we're going to talk about uh, that
Yes, and in a little bit you can explain a little more about Global Citizen, but it is very cool and very true of what you say that in Europe gap years are almost encouraged. I also have friends from Europe, so very valid in taking that decision, and soon we'll get to a little more information on that Global Citizen Year. Daily, last but not least, how did you come to the decision of taking a gap year, and did you feel supported? Did you have to convince your parents?
Okay, first of all, I didn't love the idea of the virtuality in college because I spent my last year of high school taking classes through this virtuality because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I didn't want to go to college like in that way, like through a computer screen. So that's why that was my first reason. But besides that, I knew that I wanted to do more things or activities that I couldn't do in my last year of high school before going to college properly. So I decided to do volunteering and made an internship and get more involved in social activism, things that I really wanted to do before college. And also, same as Carlos, I graduated from the International Baccalaureate program. So I really needed time for myself to breathe, to relax, and to get some motivation to go to college. Just not start because I had to. I wanted to start because I wanted to, and I wanted to find an academic interest which I will like love in college. And then my parents support me because same as Sammy, I'm an opportunity funds grantee, and they were so happy for me. They knew that I really wanted to go to study abroad, so they support my decision because it was not a decision that I took alone. It was with them, and yeah, I felt supported the first time that I told them, and I feel supported now too.
Great. So now you all have hinted at what you've done during your gap years or what you're doing during your gap years. But now I want to invite you to tell us, what did you do and how did you find these opportunities? And for this question, we're going to go in order because we have some pictures. So first, I'm going to give the floor to Tammy to tell us what you've done and explain what Bridge is, because I, for example, didn't know what Bridge was. So please let us know what you've done this last year.
Okay, thank you. So as I had previously mentioned, with the COVID pandemic, I was no longer able to get involved in my extracurricular activities the same way I did prior to the pandemic. So one of my main activities that I've done since ninth grade is playing bridge. And I've taught bridge, and I'm going to tell you what bridge is. Bridge is a card game. It is not very popular here in Mexico or in North America, there is the American Country Bridge League, but it's mostly composed by people from the United States and Canada, mostly by United States citizens. And it's often seen as a game that is usually played by older people, older women and older men, and usually white. So it is kind of uncommon to see or to get to know a Mexican person who was born in Mexico, because there are many players, but they are from out of the country who come here to Mexico and play bridge. So it is uncommon to see Mexicans playing bridge. But back when I was in ninth grade, I saw a poster that advertised free bilingual classes of bridge. I didn't know what bridge was, but I was very interested in practicing my English skills. So I went to the classes and I fell in love with the game. If you are not familiar with this game, you are probably familiar with chess. It is not similar. This is a card game. Chess is a game that you play with only one person, but I often use this comparison to get you to know kind of how complex this game is. You play in pairs, you have 52 cards, the same deck of cards that you will use to play poker, and you have 40 points, and all of everything in the game has to do with math, has to do with strategy. It improves your memory skills and also your communication skills, because you cannot talk with your partner. You can only use something we call codes. And for example, something that really surprises me even to this day is that, as I mentioned, not many people who are from Mexico play bridge. So most of the time I'm playing with retirees from the US and Canada. And I've also thought people, or have become close with people who play bridge and do not speak English. So sometimes they both have to play together. And how can they play if one only speaks Spanish and the other person only speaks English through codes? And that fascinates me to this day because they communicate through codes. So when the COVID pandemic started, I was giving classes. It was not only me, I had a team at La Liga de Bridge Oaxaca, but we had about 80 to 90 people who we taught each Saturday. Once we were no longer able to give the classes because there were many people and there were many restrictions, I looked for ways to continue playing bridge. So I started playing bridge online, and since I do speak English, I had the opportunity to look for opportunities that are offered by the American Contract Bridge League. For instance, back in January of 2020, I took an online workshop. And after that workshop, I got a chance to be certified as a teacher, as a bridge teacher. So I'm the only Mexican woman certified as a bridge teacher. And I also became the first Mexican woman to become a member of the American Bridge Teachers Association. And there are only two Mexicans in this association, and the other one is a bridge player who is a male. So, and I believe I was also the only teen. So most of the times when I join classes or when I join events hosted by the American Contract Bridge League, I am the only teenager or the only girl from Mexico. Most of them are retirees from the US and Canada. And the Queen of Bridge Scholarship, or the King or Queen of Bridge Scholarship, is a scholarship that is given to one graduating high school senior each year. So the thing that these high school seniors have in common is that they have a great involvement in bridge. Most of them even have bridge has something, or the American Contract Bridge League has something called master points. So the more master points you have, the more experience you have, the more advanced player you are. However, since here in Oaxaca, there is not one certified bridge director who can give us master points. I only had one in comparison to other king or queen bridge winners who have had 500 or more. So I was a bit unsure about applying to the scholarship, but I applied and it was given to me back in August. It also includes a $2,000 scholarship for when I start my undergraduate studies. And that is one way I continue to be involved with bridge. Also, here is Conjuvesi, that you cannot see this C, the second C, but it's Conjuvesi, it's the National Youth Council of Science and Humanities. I became involved with this youth organization back in June last year. I started as the state president here in Oaxaca of human rights. Now I'm working more with the national board. And I actually did a series of online interviews with different representatives from the committees of the Olympic or the Olympiads, the academic contests that take place in Mexico every year. So there are about 30 plus hours of content on the Facebook page of the National Youth Council of Science and Humanities. And that was something really interesting. That is what you can see down on the screen. That is the round table we had with past winners from the physics Olympiads here in Mexico and the international ones, and all of them are Mexicans. They shared their tips, they shared their experiences, and we also had the representative from the national committee of that Olympiad to give us a talk. And I also hosted a series of interviews with some of these people or these medalists who are now studying in the United States to tell us how they did that. It is actually kind of common for these medalists to go and study in the United States. So those are some things I've done during my gap year.
Very cool. Very, very unique. I'm sure we'll all look up for a few videos about bridge, because I agree with what you said. Bridge is commonly referred to in the United States as a game that older people play. So it's super interesting that you found that and that you got so good at it. Next, I want to invite Daly to tell us about a couple of the things that you did or you've been doing over the last year.
Okay, I know there's more pictures, so I'm going to start talking about Soñemos con Crecer. That is the activism volunteering that I mentioned briefly before. So I knew I wanted to do some volunteering this year in my gap year, but I didn't know that I wanted to get involved with social justice and activism until I found Soñemos con Crecer. Last year, I was part of a program called Soy Valentía, which is a network of young women. And there, one of the girls that I met there create this project, and I applied to volunteer there. So it was amazing because I was part of Soñemos con Crecer through virtuality. I actually don't know in person any of the girls in the project, but I'm close to them through all the things that we have developed. So talking about our activities in the project, um we are focused on the prevention of gender violence. So we have developed some workshops in which we invite young people to learn more about what is gender violence, how to identify and prevent this issue that's big in Costa Rica, sadly. So I learned leadership skills there, and also how to work through virtuality, which was at some point really difficult. Also, I did an unpaid internship at the beginning of this year in a coffee and cacao farm called Rancho Eden. And there I helped as a tourist guide in the cacao and coffee tour. As you can see, the chocolates that are there, which are delicious, and a picture in which I snake out in the kitchen. um, I really enjoyed that internship, and I choose to do it because I I have always have a sense of what I want to study, which is business. And there I had the opportunity to learn more about sustainable business practices and also to learn more about tourism, which I really love because of the place I grew up. And finally, I'm doing a volunteer project in a wild animal rescue center called Proyecto Asís. I have to take two buses to go from my house to there, but it doesn't matter really much because I really like to go there to spend time with the animals, and I knew that I wanted to do some volunteering, in-person volunteering. So I contact the rescue center, and they accept me as their volunteer. So I go there once a week, and I have learned also leadership skills. And well, my work there is mostly like prepare meals for the animals and helping in the tours that they made to gain funds for like cover the expenses in the place.
Very cool. Very different projects, but all very cool and have taught you different things. And now, Carlos, I invite you to tell us a little bit more about what your global citizen year was, where you went, how you found this opportunity, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I took this gap year back in 2017, between 2017 and 2018, after my high school graduation, and I came across this program called Global Citizen Year, which is an 8-month cultural immersion program, through which all the participants go through 1 week of training at Stanford University, which what they call a global lunch. Then, we so Global Citizen Year operates in Senegal, Brazil, India, and Ecuador. I was designated to the exchange program in Brazil, because, well, at the time I had already been in Europe, I had been in the United States, and, well, I grew up in Central America, so I felt like it was, a good opportunity to expand on my language skills, specifically because I'm interested in international affairs. So, I, so during my gap year, I I I lived with a host family. I had an apprenticeship with a local NGO, and I had Portuguese classes. So, in my apprenticeship, which, it's the picture on the bottom left corner. Um, uh, so my NGO worked as a bridge between social entrepreneurs and social investors, promoting activities and projects that promote community development. And they're also involved in a lot of social projects. And it was challenging at the beginning because I did not speak Portuguese, and no one in my internship spoke Spanish or English. So, the first couple months, were pretty difficult, because also in my host family, no one spoke like Spanish or English. So, I spent the first couple weeks speaking Portuñol, which is what we call, Portuguese and Spanish. But it was definitely rewarding. And I think, and one of the things that I defer is that you at the beginning said that, a gap year is sort of a whole. We tend to have that assumption there. But in my personal experience, I would call it more like a bridge year, because it did help me connect, a part of me that was not fulfilled by my formal education, uh, which is why I think a gap year is exactly the wrong metaphor for what a gap year can be. Um, because I feel like I gain a whole, um, uh, redefinition of what I wanted to do and pursue. Because I knew I wanted to study business, and then working with an NGO that works with, corporate social responsibility. You see the other side of business and the potential it has to bring about change in local communities. Um, so that's what I did.
Very cool. And I agree with you. I think the term gap year kind of gives a negative connotation when it can be a very positive thing. And so last but not least, Maria Fernanda, tell us about the different cursos libres and the different projects you've been working on as you deferred this year to start your studies next year.
Well, I decided I wanted to do several cursos libres that are around 1 month and a half, 2 months. And first of all, I started with the digital marketing project, and it was pretty cool. We had 3-hour classes once a week, and we learned like from the basis of how to use Google to make marketing, how the different tools like free Google tools to create marketing, and get to know about like this new world of marketing. And I got a pretty basic certificate, but it like makes me know that I was able to accomplish it. And were um we were guided through the process, and we did our like marketing project of our company or of anything we wanted, and was like a pretty cool way to spend my time. After that, I did also design thinking, that is like basically the process of the process thinking to create a business, to create a new project, and the steps you must take and the best way to build a successful business. So I like a lot of business. I actually took business classes in high school, so I had a pretty good idea, but it helped me, and we were set in groups to make a project of ourselves, and it was pretty cool. And also, I did some cooking classes, which I love. Actually, it's part of my career, what I'm going to study. So I took cooking classes that were my favorite, and it was called Curso de Supervivencia, which we were taught like from the basis of cooking rice and how to chop vegetables and everything. And we also made pasta, pizza, like a little bit of everything to be able to survive basically when you need to cook alone. And I thought it was a pretty good idea and helpful for me to have, since I'm going to be studying in the US, and it will be very helpful to know how to cook. And
Yes.
I also very very like a very basic Excel course with a teacher that she helped me understand Excel and like know the basic things, since nowadays it's like pretty useful and they use it a lot. So that's basically what I've done the past months, and I'm looking to see if I do any more courses, if I do some volunteer. I want to learn a language and see what other new opportunities I can get.
Very cool. So in Mafer's case, these are cursos libres. In other words, as she mentioned, it's kind of like professional development. It's not necessarily a university credit for a university degree, which is how Mafer is able to kind of comply with the rules of being a first year student. So for the next few questions, I think we're going to take turns because we're running out of time, because you guys have such great answers. So I want to ask Daly for this one. Why do you think that you're a better candidate to apply to U.S. universities and colleges after taking the sabbatical year? What do you think you have gained that'll help you get into these institutions?
Well, first of all, I made like a strategy about the activities that I told you and what I'm going to study in college, because I'm interested in business and tourism. So as you saw, I did an unpaid internship related with business, and I started this volunteering project at Proyecto Asís, which is a place that offer tours for international people. So from that, I think that I connected my academic interest with the things that I'm doing now, which I'm learning even before going to college. I'm having the practice before going, and that has gave me like a really good idea of what I'm going to do when I get there, and all the perspectives and views that I can bring to a international institution. So that was like my strategy to show myself as a really good candidate who's interested but have reasons to be interested in the field of business, for example. Besides that, I I took a breath, and I like had time for myself too. That's something I will not deny. So because of that, I think I have learned how to be a determined person, and that's a really good skill if I'm going to study abroad, because I can make my decision if I don't have my parents or my closest friends there. I think I'm more prepared to have like an experience abroad from all the things that I have learned, like doing all these activities in this year that I think I'm more mature to. So yeah.
Very good. Yeah, I think that depending on what you do, you can have a clearer vision of where you want to go in your life or the different paths you want to take. You can also have intercultural experiences, which are going to open your mind. All great things that universities in the US are definitely going to look for. So I'm going to now ask Carlos, looking back to 2017, 2018, what would you consider the pros and cons related to your decision to take a gap year? Like, do you regret taking that year? Are you happy with it? What do you think of it when you look back?
When I look back, I can't really think of songs at this point. I had an amazing time, and I met incredible people. I gained practical skills. I learned a new language. I became aware of like why or what sort of career path I wanted to pursue, not necessarily, um, you know, working for myself, but also, pursuing a career in public service, perhaps. Um, so initially, I felt what we call FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. Everyone's going to college, everyone's doing something, everyone's being productive, everyone's doing what we're supposed to do. And I thought that, oh, maybe I'm wasting my time. But I feel like based on my experience and what I hear from the other panelists, um, a gap year experience could be deeply formative. And just look at people discovering new passions and learning more about themselves. And I think because of those reasons, I can only think of positive things about my gap year experience.
Great. Well, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask two people these questions. First, I want Tammy to let us know how are you explaining your gap year and the Common App where it asks, and then I'm going to ask Mafer about how she justified her deferral. So first, let's start with Tammy.
Okay. Thank you, Mo. So on the Common App, when I selected that I did or will take a gap year, there is a 250 word prompt that I have to answer. I just have to explain the reason for this gap in my educational in my education. So I honestly just wrote what I told you in 250 words. I told what I wanted to do at first, what was my original plan back in 2020 before the pandemic started, and then how the pandemic affected this decision that I had. And I finished it with the telling about the opportunity fund scholarship, how I won it, and by winning it, I accepted it, and I knew once I signed the document that I was sent that I had to take a gap year, that there was no going back. So I explained it that way in 250 words.
Very cool. And Mafer, what kind of justification did you put in your request to Purdue to defer for a year?
So now that we're talking about this, I forgot to mention that during my gap year, the decision also was even more of a decision because of the pandemic. I'm very, I don't know how to say it in English, almática. So for me, it hasn't been that easy. So basically, the justification I gave was that my doctor wouldn't recommend of me to go into university during this time. So I decided it would be a good idea to use this, but I also mentioned that I wanted to have time for myself and to grow as a person. So that was basically my request.
Very cool. Exactly. So yeah, sometimes for health reasons, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, if you have, like in Mafer's case, she has asthma, and in the moment she had to decide, the vaccination process was still, a little bit slow in different parts of the world. So she took that decision and it was perfectly okay. Okay, so now I'm going to ask probably all of you to briefly give us a recommendation about what you recommend to students who are thinking about potentially taking a gap year. So for example, me as an Education USA advisor, I recommend that you are not afraid of it. There's no rush to get your degree in life if you get your degree 1 year later than your friends. But two, if you're going to take a gap year, to really think about what you want to do, because playing video games 2 times a week and hanging out with your dog is not something that's going to make your profile stronger. Whereas doing volunteering and free courses and all of these things, that's definitely going to help you grow as a person, right? So that's my advice as an Education USA advisor. Let's see. Carlos, what is some short advice for people who are thinking about taking a bridge year, as you say?
Do it. If you're thinking about it, that means that you might be, if you go to college instead, you might be putting yourself in a situation with you're going to have a first rough first semester. You know, but I mean, um, just thinking about the advantages of taking a gap year. If you structure it well, as Mo said, um, if you find something that is going to look good, on your college application, absolutely pursue that, because it can give you a really good an increased college success in the sense that um, it's going to show maturity and independence, and um, depending on what you do, it can show that you're willing to push yourself out of your comfort zone to develop new skills, um, and and um, and that looks good on a college application, depending on how you portray it on the college application. So absolutely, don't be afraid of it. This is not a race. um, and in times like COVID-19, maybe learning through a screen might not be the best for you, because been doing that for like 2 years now, and I am exhausted. uh, so
Very
yeah,
good.
be part of it.
Thank you. Daly, do you have anything to add to that? What would you recommend to those who are thinking about a gap year?
Well, first of all, I agree with you about like make a kind of a list of the activities that they will want to do through the gap year, because I don't know, it's important to plan the year in a way that you will feel that you're pursuing your interest, maybe in the academic field, like if you want to explore more about what would you like to do in college, and also try some new interests for like yourself that are outside of the academic, because for example I started to practice CrossFit and I really like that, and it's totally outside of the academic, um, of my academic interests. So I think that's the first thing that I'll recommend, and then don't put a lot of pressures on yourself if you couldn't do some activity, or maybe you didn't like some volunteering that you start, or some project, or some program or curso libre. So yeah, just don't put a lot of pressure if something does not go as you plan it.
Great. Tammy, anything else to add?
Yes, thank you, Mo. So adding to what all of you had already said, I would recommend to have at least one, if it's more than one, that's even better, but at least one activity that you truly want to deeply pursue during your gap year, because this is a time where you will not have to be rushing from school to work or from school to your extracurricular activities, and you can actually focus on developing and getting really good at something. As they say, do not punish yourself, do not overwork, because it can be really exhausting. There are like these two sides. On one hand, you can go and be very relaxed and then be very bored because you are doing absolutely nothing or you have nothing to do. And on the other hand, you can also be overworking and not sleeping, and that is also not a very nice way of living, because as Carlos said, the first semester is going to be rough. So I would recommend finding an in-between where you do have some rest from high school, because I know that most students have a really rough senior year of high school due to the COVID pandemic and everything. And also be okay with activities that you do. If you want to learn a language, but you are not going, you have to be realistic. You are not going to learn 7 languages in 1 year. You maybe get really good at 1 or 2, but that's it. Like, put real expectations. If otherwise, you're just going to get disappointed, and that's a gap year is not for that.
Very good. Mafe, recommendations for these potential gap year students?
Yes, also that most of people underestimate gap years and they like undervalue them, but actually you get to do so many things that they would love to have like the time to do. So take those cooking classes, take those English classes, whichever thing you like, and never forget like to take what you like and not only for extracurricular things for your like university application. It's also important to do things that you like and to also have those like that you may not like love but will help you, but the most important is to do things that you really will enjoy during your rest time and your gap year before going to college.
Very good. Thank you. So those are all the questions that we have for you guys in terms of the questions that we made beforehand, but I think we have a few questions from the audience. I know we're almost out of time, so I'm going to ask them really quickly. One question, I think I'm going to answer it, but somebody asked, I have it here. Is it better to strengthen an application with activities more related to your career or more related to volunteering? And in my opinion, as an Education USA advisor, I think it's important to have a balance because the universities and colleges know that you guys are 17, 18, 19 years old. They don't expect you to do super professional internships where you're like gonna just be wearing a suit every day. And also thinking about the culture that we have in the United States of doing something for the good of others. And so we always kind of hold importance on volunteering and helping others. Even if you come from a humble background, you are still able to help someone who is in a more difficult situation. So I would say, honestly, to try and balance it, do professional related activities, but also volunteering activities. And as Mafer said, things that you like to do for fun as well. If you like to go to the gym, if you like to walk your dog, those are all, that's great for your mental health. It's helping you become a mature individual, etc., etc. So I have a question and I'm going to ask it and whoever wants to answer it can answer it. But what was a typical day like for you during your gap year? Because I think that's what people worry about when they take a gap year. They're like, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do every day? So what was a typical day for you guys? Anyone can answer. Yeah, Tammy, go for it.
Okay, so since I decided to take a gap year back in May, I was already kind of looking for ways that I could spend my time during my gap year now that I am taking it. I finished high school back in June, so I did have some time to really at least figure out which activities I wanted to do. So I wanted to pursue, for example, this project of mine, the Expo Olympiad. So one thing that has even continued, just yesterday, I had the opportunity to interview 2 guys who won medals at the National Physics Olympiad. So I organized, or a day of mine is like I wake up and I do have, as an opportunity funds grantee, I do have to follow a certain schedule that I have to send in my my essays. I have maybe the Common App, the other applications or other materials that the universities in the United States request. Then I also do online meetings. Most of my meetings are online due to the pandemic, and I also play bridge. So I do have some things that I say, okay, I'm going to do this today, or I have 2 or 3 meetings today. But that is thanks to the planning that I had ahead.
Very good. And my next question is, and my final question for today, is how did you guys manage to stay busy during the COVID-19 pandemic? Because that is another worry or misconception, is that it's impossible to do volunteering online, or it's impossible to do an online internship. So how did you, I guess this would be more, well, maybe Carlos, and you're in college now, you've done this, is what kind of things you've done virtually that you have surprised yourself with, even though we may not always be able to leave the house right now?
I can add to that. So
Yeah.
what I decided to do to stay active was basically I decided to, since there's many people that needed donations and things like that, I contacted a like a type of organization that has teenage moms with kids and that they have like no family or support, and since they were all sent home, they weren't able to have classes, they weren't able to receive like their daily meal and everything. So to avoid having like just a normal donation of la canasta básica or whatever, I specifically asked them like what could I donate or what was the most needed things, and they sent me a list of the number of students I had to do cartucheras with everything for them to have like online classes, and another I needed to donate, I don't remember what they were. I think juguetes for el Día de los Niños, since there was in COVID, no one was donating gifts, no one was giving anything. So I decided I would do the donations, and I gave them all the presents, and I tried to do like a distance. So I left them in their, like we contact each other, and I left them in the like in their place at one time, and they then went and like got the gifts and everything. So I decided to like find like specific details of ways to help them, since it was like from a distance.
Very cool. Daily?
Well, in my case, I knew that I wanted to do some in-person volunteering, so I went to places that had the full schedule of prevention for the COVID-19, and it was a way to be sure that I was going to a safe place. But then the activities that I did, like the volunteering with Soñemos con Crecer, that was uh, full virtuality, and my application process to the universities was like through virtuality. So I found out how to mix the both worlds, right? Like in-person activities and some virtuality activities. So it is possible to do it in during the pandemic time. Just is a matter of find the right places and yeah.
Very cool. Tammy?
Thank you. So one advice that I would give to the people who want to get involved with online volunteering is looking for a local youth organization. I believe most of the people we have here today are from high school or come from high school. So there are many opportunities. For example, I just use Facebook or Instagram to look for these organizations. That's how I found out about Education USA. For instance, in Mexico, there is the National Youth Council of Science and Humanities, CONJUVESI, but there are also many other youth organizations. For example, the Alianza Global de Jóvenes Políticos, that's for politics. There is Más por Oaxaca, that is an organization here in Oaxaca, Ateneo de la Juventud, that is also for youth people. And there are activities about pretty much everything, about science, about art, about humanities, and you can get involved with them. They sometimes even have their calls for getting more people involved. You usually only have to be like 12 to 29 years old or something. Everyone in these organizations is like the same as you. Some of them have a lot of experience and you can learn a lot from them, but there are also people who, like just like me, enter with no prior experience at all. So that is a really good way to get involved in volunteering. If you want to, you can also create your own projects, and you are already surrounded with a team of people who want to make the world a better place. So I would encourage you to look for local youth organizations.
Very cool. I think Carlos had something to add, and then we'll wrap it up for today.
Yeah, guys, we're also, don't forget that we're still in the middle of a pandemic. You don't always have to be doing something. If you're managing to, eat healthy, do your homework, because, if you're
Take
managing
a
to
shower.
take a shower, you're managing to stay on top of your, responsibility, kudos to you. Just, just don't overwork yourself as well, we're all going through the entire world's going through a very difficult time, and things don't seem to be getting better anytime soon, unfortunately. But whatever you do, I just hope just stay healthy and take care of your mental health.
Very important, super important during a pandemic, taking care of your mental health in your home country and developing strategies to prepare you for a potential new chapter in another country, right? So thanks, guys. Super great stories and advice. I hope that everyone who's joining us live has learned a lot about the potential opportunities that you could do in a sabbatical, bridge, gap year, whatever you want to call it. And if we weren't able to answer any of your questions, please feel free to reach out to the closest Education USA center near you. And this is actually our last regional webinar of 2021. So keep an eye out on your Education USA pages in early 2022, as we'll begin with more webinars every Wednesday. And I hope that everyone has a safe end of the year with your loved ones, and keep washing your hands. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.